I think the best way to describe the Cardinals is weird, right? I mean, they're in just a weird situation where 2 years ago, the future couldn't have been brighter. They were easily in a playoff spot. They were Super Bowl favorites at 8-0. There was a point when it was just a given. Cliff Kingsbury was going to win Coach of the Year. Kyler Murray was going to win MVP. And this team, I don't know, are they the future dynasty? Didn't quite work out that way. Kyler got banged up. They were never the same. They ended up getting blown out in their only playoff game as they go one and done. And this year, they were just a complete dumpster fire, quite frankly. Let's start off with this chart. This is where they ranked in specific PFF grades. You see the notable, in certain positional categories. The most notable one is the passing grade, 26th in football, which, again, Kyler was not out there for the entire season, so it's the whole team, and that's why it's a lot lower. You have to assume that's going to get better. It's a fair question to ask how much better. I am of the belief that I think they will be okay in next year. I think they'll be all right with Kyler Murray. I think Kyler will get better. I think last year was a fluke. I think so. I don't know. I can't say for certain. I think it was a fluke, and you hope it was a fluke if you're a Cardinals fan, but I certainly can't say that for certain. There were other issues, though. There weren't a lot great. They pass blocked 13th best. Everything else is the next best category is their pass rush at 24th, or actually, excuse me, the coverage is 22nd. So they don't have a single top 20 category outside of pass blocking. That's not even a whole offensive line. That's just half of the offensive line because the run blocking was 30th. This is a rough team where the receiving core was 31st. Again, the Hopkins, if he's out there, obviously for 17 games, obviously it works a lot better. But running game, run defense, pass rush, coverage, take your pick. It was all a mess. So, okay, they have absolutely, I don't want to say absolutely no talent, but they don't have a ton of talent. On top of this, a lot of free agents. You look at this free agent list, it's a long one, although, who are the most notable ones here? Worth mentioning, these are just the notable free agents I put on there, not every free agent. And the number next to them is how much millions I'm projecting they would get in free agency. There's some guys that you want to make sure that you might want to make sure you re-sign. Like Max Williams, for example, I think is a good blocking tight end who I'd like to keep. Some of these interior offensive linemen, Max Garcia, Will Hernandez, Billy Price. Okay, none of them are stars. None of them are guys you have to keep by any means. But if you let walk, you have to replace them, right? So again, same thing with like Greg Dortch, same thing with like the punter Andy Lee. All these guys are guys that if you let walk, you're going to have to replace. So here's where they're at. They have currently $13 million in cap space. So on top of this, not a ton of cap space, but not in a terrible situation either. You're better than a lot of teams. Their projected cash, though, is a little bit lower. They're paying a good amount of cash this year, and it's always important to look at the cash. A lot of times people just look at cap space, but a lot of times cash actually is a better indicator of why teams are going to spend or why teams aren't spending. I mean, you look at like the Saints for the past few years, while people are wondering, well, how are they able to do this? Well, because they actually had a ton of cash, even if they didn't have the cap space. The Cowboys, a lot of people were saying, why are you getting rid of Amari Cooper? You have salary cap. Well, their cash was they were spending a ton of cash, right? So that's always important to note. The money needed to re-sign every single player I showed you would be $54 million. So they can't really re-sign all those guys. I don't think they want to re-sign, maybe any of those guys, to be honest. But if you don't, you have to find a way to replace them with somebody. And maybe the goal is, hey, let's just, lose them all. Let's sign a bunch of, replacement level players and let's just suck for a year. And then, it's a quarterback needy class, which is a good thing, even though they don't need a quarterback, because if you were to get the second overall pick, let's say, and there's a lot of good quarterbacks, a team's going to trade up to get one of those quarterbacks so you can get more value than a second round pick typically gets you. On top of it, you currently have the third overall pick this year, which you could consider trading down as well. Maybe that's how you start to fill out this roster. So while they're in a bad spot, there's worse situations to be in than to bottom out. You kind of don't want to get stuck in mediocrity. So when you already have a quarterback you believe in and you're kind of bottoming out, it's not the worst thing in the world. As for the players they could cut, there's 3 guys on this list. DeAndre Hopkins is one who's getting talked a bit about. More on him in just a second. Budda Baker and Robbie Anderson are the three. Robbie Anderson's gone. He's not going to be a Cardinal next year. So there you go. Now you have $25 million instead of $13 million. Budda Baker, I think you'd like to keep. I don't think you'd want to get rid of. DeAndre Hopkins, I think you'd like to keep and you don't want to get rid of. You're not going to just cut these guys. The only reason they're on the list is if you do want to tank, if you do want to rebuild for the future, these are, to me, not cut candidates, but trade candidates. And the money you see on the screen next to them is obviously that's how much millions they would save. But you might be a little bit confused about, wait, what does it mean? I see Hopkins, okay, I get it. He would save $8 million if you cut him, but what's the number in parentheses? That is, it was after June 1st, how much money it would save. So you would save $19 million for getting rid of Hopkins after June 1st, and you save $13 million for Budda Baker after June 1st. Now, who are you signing after June 1st? Probably nobody, but, again, it still could potentially help you and could be notable. I think what can also happen is if you trade Hopkins, one contingency of the deal could be you make the opposing team pay the entire contract. You can do that kind of stuff when you trade somebody, and teams do that all the time. Like that was the Khalil Mack trade was a perfect example of that, where the way it was supposed to work was that the Bears would be on the hook for a ton of money, but in a contingent of trading him was that the Chargers had to take on the entire, or at least almost the entire contract. So I would think something like that would happen if they got rid of either of those two players. Should they? I think no. I think you want to still keep players, and a DeAndre Hopkins doesn't come along too frequently. I think you can rebuild quickly enough that, have a year with Hopkins and Kyler. It's fun for the fans. You're not going to be very good, but, again, use this third pick wisely. Use the next year and what you have with that draft capital wisely. It's not crazy to think that you could rebuild in 2 years. It does happen, especially if Kyler and Hopkins return to being Kyler and Hopkins. Again, the question, though, is what is Hopkins going to be Hopkins again? There is a legitimate concern for that because he's not getting any younger, and maybe your idea is, okay, I just don't know what you're going to be, so we're going to trade you now to try to, again, get some draft capital to hopefully build for the future, but also maybe get the draft capital now while you can. It's an option on the table. At the end of the day, for the Cardinals, even if Kyler Murray returns to MVP form, they're probably not going to be a playoff team next year, I think. There's a lot of holes in this roster, and, I don't know how much stronger they're going to get. But I do think that as far as rebuilding teams go, I think there's a lot of worse situations to be in than to be the Arizona Cardinals right now because you have the quarterback. And it's a quarterback-driven league. Getting a quarterback who can thrive like that, I don't know. Worse situations, I think, that you could be in. But again, that's just what I think. What do you guys think? What should the Cardinals do from here? What will they do from here? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching. If you like movies, check out my movie review channel. Every single movie title you see on the screen, I have a video about coming out within the next 2 weeks. I'm uploading a video every day for 2 weeks, so definitely make sure you're subscribed there. The link is in the description below. I got some other stuff on there too, some like breakdowns of certain scenes I like and things like that, so check it out.